Eric from Ember. You're watching Aftershocks TV.
So yeah, so guys, recently Ultimate Classic Rock, you know, I like, you guys like Ultimate Classic Rock at all? I think it's a pretty good publication. Yeah. They came out with a top 15 bands of the Sunset Strip. You know, and now, you know, obviously when people think of Sunset Strip, you know, you get to think obviously Motley Crue, Poison, Dokken, right? And a lot of it was, of course, because of MTV and how they, you know, glorified LA pretty much all day, every day. But there's a lot of bands in Hollywood that were playing the Strip going back to, you said, to the 60s. We were talking about this before we came on. You know, bands like the Byrds and Buffalo Springfield and so what. The Doors in the 70s.
Doors,
yeah, they were known to whiskey. That was like where the whiskey became the Whiskeys because of the Doors. And then, of course, Van Halen in the late 70s and 80s. But that's when it really, you know, took off. And then MTV obviously, you know, took it from there. It was known for, you know, obviously not just rock, but the debauchery of it as well. That was like the thing that was attached to it too. It was just very debaucherous, and that's what sold it. So, I mean, there is a lot more to this Strip than just, you know, hair and glam metal. So you have to see that article. You know, I was thinking like it'd be cool, but let's do our top 15 Sunset Strip bands. Let's get into that. Let's start with our guest, Richie. Won't you tell us what you got? 15 or whatever you got, top, whatever it is. 15. I got 15 of them. I did the 15. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I think I've got 7 or 8 maybe.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. So Van Halen has to be number 1.
Ah, yeah. Okay.
I think a lot. Amen. If you were to ask anyone, a big band on the Sunset Strip that made it, Van Halen, I think will be probably top of 99% of the list.
Yeah.
Massively influential, fantastic songs, great musicians, one of the best frontmen in rock, lasting impact on music. Even now, you know, like first album in 1978 when it came out, that didn't really sound like anybody else, like completely reinvented guitar playing for a lot of people. Van Halen has to be number 1 for me. I know they're not a Sunset Strip fan, Matt, you were saying, but I've always been a huge fan of Y&T. I know they played a lot of shows in you know, down around all over California over the years. Never really broke. And I can never understand why. I think they've got one of the best singer guitar players in hard rock, Dave Meniketti. Saw him play a couple of years ago. They did a 2.5-hour show, and they no guitar solos, or no, you know, like no wanking solos, no drum solo really. And Meniketti was on stage for 2.5 hours, sang his ass off, played great, and he's probably close to 70 now, if he's not.
Yeah, must be.
And he's the only member of that classic lineup that's still alive.
Sure.
I think they tried to change their sound a little bit in the mid-'80s, trying to become more MTV friendly. Kind of hurt them a little bit. They messed around with a few different producers. Did try to do a couple of covers to please the label. But I think they're a massively influential band. And the interesting thing for me about Y&T is when I've interviewed a lot of the thrash metal musicians from California, either from San Francisco or LA, they wax poetical about Y&T. They absolutely worship the band. Even though their music mightn't sound a lot like them, Y&T had a massive influence on them. I'm going to name bands that you're going to just name as well.
Sure, yeah. Oh, yeah.
All right. Rat, massive Rat fan.
Huge
Rat fan. Out of the Cellar, to me, was a wow moment. When you're getting into hard rock and metal and you're into Maiden and some of the English bands, and then someone hands you, you know, this is a band from the US or a hard rock band. And I think Rat was one of the first ones. And I think that the first 3 albums that came out, but someone played me Out of the Cellar first, and I just couldn't get enough of them. I had to get Invasion and I had to get Dancing Undercover. It's just a huge band for me. Wasp, I've always been a Wasp fan. I think Blackie's brought out, you know, a lot of good music. Even the recent stuff he's done, he might have gone off, you know, off the deep end lyrically a bit, you know, compared to what he was known for.
Sure.
But you know, they're a fantastic band, and the Headless Children album that he brought out in '88, I think, is a masterpiece.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah.
But I'm not dissing their earlier work, because the debut album is great, and I love The Last Command, and Inside the Electric Circus is a bit sketchy for me, but you know, they're a very influential band as well when it comes to I think the LA scene.
Yeah, the scene.
Dokken is another big one. It's all to do with the singer and the guitar player. They had George Lynch and Don. I think, you know, they complemented each other very well. I think Don had the pop sensibility. George brought, you know, the crunch and the fantastic guitar playing. This is the one I mentioned to you off air, Matt, that Rough Cut.
Yeah.
Would they be a Sunset Strip band?
Yes, they would be. Yep.
Yeah. Paul Sciartino is one of my favorite singers.
Yeah.
Their debut album is amazing.
Yeah.
I think it came out in '85. I think Tom Allen produced it. And I've interviewed Paul, and he said what killed them is that they waited too long to get the album out, that all the bands like Rat and Dokken, they got their albums out before them. They wanted Ronnie James Dio to produce it. And they waited around for a while, and then when they got Tom Allen to do it, they were kind of chasing everyone else.
Yeah.
The last band I wrote down, and again, Matt, you can tell me if it's a Sunset Strip band, but I'm a fan. Leatherwolf. Would they be considered Sunset Strip?
You know, it's a good question.
Well, someone's got to look it up.
I'm on it right now.
Okay, Matt,
Give me 2 seconds. I think they would be considered, because they're from Huntington Beach, Orange County. So yeah, you could get an LA band. So they get it. Yep, absolutely. There you go.
I've always been a fan of them. The Street Ready album's fantastic. They never broke. But they got the triple axe attack. They're known for that. I know they only had a couple of albums, and then they broke up for a while and got back together. And Dean Roberts, the drummer, is the only original member that's left. But again, they're another band that pops up when I'm talking to musicians from around that time, from that area, that people cite as being an influence on them, because of a lot of the guitar playing is over the top. Because when you've got three guitar players, it's like, what are they doing? But they never broke either, even though they were on Island Records, which is a major label. That's all I got.
No, it's good. I'm glad you got the Rough Cut and Leatherwolf in there too. It's two a little bit off the beaten path kind of a band, so that's good. Yeah.
Cool. So I can jump in. Obviously going to be a lot of crossover, because Richie and I grew up in the same circles, listened to the same bands. I mean, obviously you can't argue with Van Halen. Don't need to say any more about that. What hasn't been said. Rat would probably, if you just go back into the '80s scene, just leave Van Halen aside. So the '80s hair scene, not LA based, I guess, with Rat and Winger would be my two, favorite bands.
Same here. We've talked about that. Yeah,
we have 100%. So they can do no wrong. I mean, I remember the first time I heard Out the Cellar, and it was like hearing that Bow Hill production. It was like, what the fuck am I listening to? It was like I couldn't get enough of it. I actually went back, talking about Metallica earlier, but I went back and listened to Out the Cellar and recently, and just start to finish, and it's just, again, it's a flawless piece of work. It's one of the best albums of the decade for me. It still holds up today. Wasp, again, big fan back in the day. Saw them in Donington, I think in '86, if I can remember. 87 when Blackie was up on stage and throwing raw meat out of the stage, and you had the chick up on board, and she was tied up against something, and all that kind of stuff. So I was a big Blackie fan. They obviously went off the rails a little bit. Some of the albums went a bit dark, and Kill Fuck Die and all that kind of stuff. It's all right. A couple of songs in there.
Oh, Tommy.
I'm back. Hang on a second.
Oh, there you go. Okay, you froze up
Wi-Fi better not start giving me jib tonight. But I know that I saw him on the recent tour, and I think he played 9 songs, 55 minutes, and backing tracks. I was going, like, really, Blackie? Is that your legacy?
Oh, yeah, that's right. You saw them.
Yeah, not good. And just a few others just jumping around. Obviously, Motley. I was a big Motley fan back in the day. There's a band that really caught my interest from the first album right up to Feel Good. And then they just kind of disappeared off the radar. But the window that I loved them, You know, most people did, I guess.
Yeah,
that's the way
absolutely.
to look at it. And you know, and Y&T, you know, we're going to talk about them perhaps in a different segment, but that band are just tremendous. Even the albums they released in the 90s that, like, when they sold one copy, are fantastic. You know, but yeah, I definitely think Summertime Girls didn't help them. To Richie's point earlier, you know, it's almost like they tried too hard. Even though the album is good and Contagious is a good album, they just tried too hard on the sound and the scene and whatever else, and they just got lost in the shuffle. And one of those things, maybe poor management, didn't get the breaks, whatever it was. And that's kind of it for me. There's a few others dotted in there. I have a few bands I don't like: Faster Pussycat, LA Guns. I know Poison of Pennsylvania. We're quite right, LA band.
Yeah. And Poison really is, even though they were from Pennsylvania, you know, they made their mark in the Sunset. So they'd be considered.
I have one line over here that I don't really like: Bullet Boys. Were Bullet Boys LA?
They're LA, yes, and I don't like them either. So yeah.
See, there's a band I just never. One of those bands I never kind of. Guns N' Roses, I was never.
Yeah, I couldn't get into. I couldn't.
No,
get into
just,
both
I have
either,
one section here: Faster Pussycat, LA Guns, Poison, quite right. I don't hate any of them. A matter of fact, I've got like all their albums almost by every band. But they're just they when you separate like the Van Halens or the Wasps or the Motleys, the Rats, they're second tier to me.
Sure,
they just weren't quite good enough, you know.
Hey, Matt, would Jafria be considered a Sunstrip band?
Well, yeah, and I'll bring that up in a second. Well, I'll just start from my thing, but yes, they would be, because he was also an Angel, right? So
yeah, that's right.
And Angel, even though they're originally from DC, I got them at number 14 here on my list as Angel. Because technically I consider them a Sunset Strip band, because that's, once again, where they made their mark. I mean, even though they're from DC, they really weren't known back there. It was until they obviously moved to LA, where they got signed by, you know, Gene Simmons, or was it Gene Simmons?
He did sign him,
right? Yeah,
he did.
Yeah. But yeah, so I'll start with my Guns N' Roses. I'm not a huge Guns N' Roses fan either, but I mean, you can't argue with Appetite for Destruction. I mean, it's a phenomenal record. And if everything else they've done, yes, not a fan. But I put them at 15 just for that record alone. I mean, it is a great record. It really is. Like I said, Angel was 14. I liked Angel. I grew up, my dad was a fan, so I listened to that a lot as a kid. And that was, once again, the 70s mostly, or really early 80s, before it really took off, the Sunset Strip. But I'm definitely a fan. Number 13, I had Wasp. I mean, I'm not going to really add too much more, as you guys already said. I know, like I said, I am a handful of years younger than you guys, so I remember when they first came out, and when Animal, you know, when I first heard of Animal, you know, just Fuck Like a Beast. The mystique around the band was huge. As a youngster, you know, just hearing about them, not even hearing the songs, I knew all about this mystique from them before I even heard a song from them. I was just like, that's the sickest band ever. So yeah, I got Wasp in there at 12. I like their earlier stuff, Striper.
I forgot to mention them.
How did I miss them?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Sorry, Michael.
Because I mean, to me, like I said, great. I love their earlier stuff, and just for the fact that for a band like that was throwing out Bibles when you're in the land of debauchery, that's just rebellious as it can be. You know what I mean? If you want to think of rebellion, that's just completely off the beat. So anyway, yeah, Striper, fan of them, obviously. Yeah, number 12. Number 11, I put Keel. So Right to Rock, I love that record. It was one of the first records I bought. Me and my brother actually chipped in to buy that when I first saw the video. There was a station in New York. It's a UHF, you know, independent station that used to play all these LA metal videos like throughout the day. And so that was the first time I'd seen that, and we learned a lot about these LA bands like Autograph and so forth from that channel. Surprised you didn't have Autograph, Tom. I know that's your guilty pleasure. So
there's another one I forgot about.
Number 10 I have is Warrior. You know, they only had the one album.
Bob loved Warrior.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, fighting for the earth. It's a solid record. They only really had that one record. They didn't put out another one for like 15 or 13 years, I think it was. Joe Floyd's a great dude, and you know, I thought he was a real good guitarist. So yeah, number 10. And then just getting to my top 10 at number 9 at Great White. Obviously, I love the first Great White, the self-titled record. I love that. Stick It. I love the cover of Substitute from The Who. I love that. So not really a huge fan of like the Once Bitten Twice Shy kind of era, but I did like the early Great White was definitely a bit heavier, you know, than the later stuff.
Yeah.
I have Dokken in there next. Like you said, you guys pretty much, you know, said what we had to say about Dokken. Right behind that too, I got Lynch Mob. I mean, I kind of just put them right there too because they're a Sunset Strip band. Right after that, you know, after obviously Dokken and so forth. So, you know, I do love George Lynch. I think he's a great guitarist. Then yeah, Quiet Riot I got after that. Really, I'm not a huge Quiet Riot fan, but I do love Metal Health. That was one of the first really metal albums I you know, grew up loving. You know, obviously it was the first one here I know in the States to go #1, the first metal album. So I always have a soft spot in my heart. But yeah, the rest of their stuff I was not a fan of. I really thought they were a very average band. And then top 5, I got LA Guns. I do like LA Guns a lot. I thought they were really like a grittier version. They're very similar to me, obviously, to Guns N' Roses, but I really like
the same groove. Yeah.
Yeah, I love their grit. Number 4 is an interesting one. Is a band from the late 70s, Legs Diamond. I don't know if you guys know much about Legs Diamond.
Yeah, great band.
Yeah, they were considered the American Deep Purple, as a lot
Their
of people.
Their debut album is fantastic.
It's great. First 2 are awesome.
That's right. The first 2, you're right. Fantastic album.
Fantastic and very underrated band.
Right.
My opinion. And then the top 3 like you guys. Number 3, I had Motley Crue. Number 2, Rat, and of course number 1, Van Halen. Nothing else to be said there.
Yeah, that's the strip. But I was on the Sunset Strip twice actually. Once maybe 6 years ago, and I remember driving or walking down the strip, standing outside the Whiskey, and I was actually just standing there going, "Holy shit balls! I'm on the Sunset Strip." Like it was like Richie and I read about this. It was like another planet, you know. And here I was standing there, and then I was standing outside the Whiskey, and then it was a Sunday morning. I remember. And the side door was open, and there was guys moving in furniture. And I was going, "Can I go in there?" And the guy said, "I don't give a fuck. So whatever. I'm moving in chairs. So do whatever you want." So I walked in, and then I was going, "Holy shit balls! I'm in the Whiskey." Like this was like mind blowing shit to me. I was looking at the stage and looking at the photographs on the walls and shit. And then a couple of years ago, then with Bob Nalbandian, that's when you know, when I was in obviously the LA area, and met him not on the Sunset Strip, but that was the time I was in town, and you know, went to the Rainbow, and I saw you know, the Lemmy statue, and had a beer in there, and that was just a trip just to I was like 16 again, you know, and kind of almost visualizing, holy shit, what went down here back in '87, you know. So it was just one of those things whereby it was I'm glad I saw it, you know.
Yeah, I think everybody, right? I mean, I know myself too. I mean, even though I was in the same country, being on the opposite coast growing up, I mean, that's all I could do in those long, cold winters was just sit there, watch MTV, watch the Rat videos, and see all the women and all the stuff, and be like, "God, what the hell am I doing here, man? I need to get 18 quick and get the fuck out of here." And go to LA. I did want, and I lived in LA for 8 years, so obviously I spent a lot of time on the strip, and it's not obviously the same. You know, in the 2000s as it was in the 80s, that was just the, you know, the obviously the glory days of it. I know I always said that I just, you know, I didn't grow up in the right time. I was definitely, you know, but I used to dream same thing about being there. And it is the Whiskey, though. I mean, the Whiskey is really not a great place, to be honest with you.
And it's small. It's really
small, and it's not a great place to see a show, to be honest with you. But because of its, you know, I mean, all those bands started there. It's just so iconic, you know what I mean, for so long. But you know, LA is a great place for music, rock and metal especially.
LA is a great place to just go and visit for 2 days and just get out.
And get out. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And Tommy, what's the other thing that a lot of those bands have in common? They never played in Ireland during their heyday.
Yeah, never. Yeah, because when Richie and I came over here, then we ended up going to see those bands. Like we were looking at Striper, and I can't remember half the bands. I saw a lot of them. Like we were, because they never toured Europe, and Matt and I talked about this. That's why, and I think I stole your line, Richie, that bands like Bon Jovi, when the scene started to change, you know, 89, 90, whatever it was, and Bon Jovi came up with Keep the Faith, and they would, well, I guess we're not making the money here. Let's go to China, Asia, Europe, and they were still playing stadiums. Bands like Slaughter, Warrant, Motley, whatever, they stopped. They just never give the UK, for the most part, in Europe, any attention. So then when the shit hit the fan, they know where to go. They had nowhere to go.
I missed the band, Matt, and I'll bring them up. Or would you consider them a Sunset Strip band? And I'm a big fan. Black and Blue.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Even though I think they're from Portland originally, in Oregon, but they're definitely a Sunset Strip band because
Yeah,
Yeah, that is an underrated band. I agree with you. Black and Blue is
yeah,
really good
Jamie
too.
St. James. I should have used this for the next segment, but they did it.
Yeah.